So we're just recording today's session. Welcome to Experts at Work. This is the science of psychological safety. Sessions for members of all three of our networks. Welcome to Dr. Sam Mather, author of Rise and Rise Together. Sam's PhD is in Organisational Psychology, Psychological Safety and Resilience. She's a qualified coach, NLP practitioner and Applied Neuroscience Practitioner, and lectures at Henley Business School and the University of Oregon. She's a specialist in designing and implementing solutions to enable employees, in particular leaders, to get the best out of others. And that's a job description I think we could all get behind. I like that a lot. The plan for today is for Sam to take us through some ideas and provocations until roughly 2:30 p.m, leaving some time for Q&A with a hard finish at 2:45. So send us questions and suggestions via chat throughout. If I can trouble you to just put yourselves on mute for now, if you would, that would be much appreciated. And Sam, all yours. Welcome and thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure. So thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you all on the video. As Richard said, my name is Dr. Sam Mather. My background is 20 years working in blue chip organisations worldwide, developing leaders primarily in talent functions. And I started to become interested in the neuroscience as neuroscience became the new thing. And I was looking at it in the context of organizations, given that some of the models that we use in organizations are like older than me, and that's saying something. So I wanted to look at something that was with a new slant around what we know about the brain. A redundancy opportunity came up, which I took, and I had an amazing 3 years back as a student, getting my doctorate, allowing me to study the neuroscience of psychological safety and resilience through the lens of neuroscience. So up until my studies, psychological safety had primarily been studied as a group construct. So Amy Edmondson, I'm sure you'll have heard of Amy Edmondson, studied psychological safety based on the influence of the leader and the group. But I'm thinking, does that mean that my psychological safety is entirely in the hands of my leader and my organization? And that made me think, I'm not so sure that can be the case. And do I want it to be the case, given that all the things that used to make us feel psychologically safe have changed or disappeared in this VUCA environment? We no longer go into the same office and see the same people and have the same, the same parking space and have the same job description. None of that applies anymore. So what role does the individual have? Does the individual have a role? And that's kind of where I started my research around, is this a one-way thing or not? So after 3 years, and I studied using actual employees. So this is practical. Most of the respondents and surveys came from IT, but there was also other VUCA environments such as financial services. And also there were some in education and they also argued VUCA, very fast moving and changing. So what did I find? Well, what I thought I'd share with you is some of the key findings and then share the why behind the findings. And you will get copies of these. I'll do a nice, neat PDF and I'll send it to Richard. So the key finding was, yes, the individual does have a role to play in their own psychological safety. You as a leader could create this nirvana of an organization, with fruit baskets and flowers and fountains and unicorns and rainbows. But that doesn't guarantee that that individual feels psychologically safe. There is still a role for the individual. The stats said that 60% of an employee's psychological safety was as a result of their environment and their leader. But 40% was to do with the individual themselves. So it is a two-way thing. You do your part, but the individual also has their part to play. And then when looking at the psychological safety of from an individual as an individual construct, 57% of psychological safety was made up of your own internal resources, specifically emotional and cognitive resources. And those who are high in psychological safety were high in emotional resources, which led to a sense of optimism, defined as believing something good will happen in the end. And cognitive resources, or the intellectual resources, which led to a sense of feeling of hope. And hope in the academic sense is referred to as having a goal or a purpose and being able to see how you would get there. So those who could see how they're going to get there had a belief in a positive outcome. It was a result of these resources, and it enabled increased psychological safety in those individuals. As a side, these were not the same resources that were required for resilience. Resilience, different cognitive resources altogether. Self-efficacy was the biggest one for resilience, and attentional control, the ability to manage where you focus your attention. They were the two biggest resources that enabled resilience. Okay, so first thing was quite interesting that there were different resources that were required for those two constructs, psychological safety and resilience. So I then began to look at, well, where's the neuroscience behind this? Why is this going on? What's happening? And I think it's becoming very popular in literature now about the good old limbic system, and it's a little bit black and white, limbic system, non-limbic system, and if we were going to do a session on the brain, we'd be here by Friday still. So for simplicity's sake, I have talked about the limbic system versus the part of the brain that you employ people for. Okay? So actually, what you're employing people for, particularly in a knowledge economy, is we're actually employing them for this part of the brain. And the reason is this is the part of the brain that involves advanced thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation, lying. Lying is a very complex process. Connecting intelligently with others, behaving in an adult to adult way. That's what you want. That's what you're paying them for. And the reason why this is the smart part of the brain is because there's a high propensity of dopamine neurotransmitters. And dopamine, along with serotonin, are what enable learning, change, adaptability, new connections to be formed. They're the neurotransmitters. Dopamine is not a hormone, it's actually a neurotransmitter. It enables neurons to connect. Fabulous. This is what we want. However, when dopamine is high, life is good. But when our limbic system is triggered, what happens is the brain perceives they're under threat. The brain is perceiving it is not safe. And the things that it's perceiving that it's not safe about are the same as when we were running around in caves. Because the sole purpose of the brain is to ensure our survival. And boy, it's done a great job. So it ain't broke. Why should it fix it? Still picking up on the same threats. And of course, as I'm no doubt you know, when we get threat, we get high cortisol, the fight or flight, high adrenaline, which under short-term circumstances can be beneficial, but over long-term is very damaging. But these two are like a seesaw. When cortisol and serotonin increase, when cortisol and adrenaline increase, dopamine and serotonin drops. The ability to think smartly is taken offline because you do not need to know quadratic equations to fight or run away. You don't need smart thinking. So the principle when we looked at psychological safety was directly related to this. If for any reason an employee does not feel safe, and particularly if it's chronic and it's over a period of time, then they will be operating here. And their ability to adapt, to change, to be innovative, to come up with new ideas, to be smart is impeded. They just can't do it. Now, there is a premise upon which this is based, which is a fairly well-known premise, is that we all have limited resources, cognitive resources. So I use an analogy of a balloon in my books, but if you imagine that we have a finite amount of resources. There is some discussion in the literature, but essentially this is the ego depletion theory by Baumeister. And we kind of know this because we've all got to that point where we go, if someone asks me one more thing, I'm just going to explode. And what you would like, ideally, is as much of this pie of cognitive resources to be invested in work. Obviously, then you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. But just think about it, and we've all been there. It's like you might have part of it is worried about your kids, another part's worried about the car broke down, the cat's sick. Then you've got general, I'm worried about COVID. This is what's left for work, this bit here. But then cortisol kicks in and you're actually spending this amount now being hyper aware, looking for threats and thinking how you can do a little bit of CYA, making sure you're safe. What a waste. So what does that mean for organizations? Well, one of the things I work with organizations about is how to create psychological safety so that the limbic system is quieter. You will never turn it off. In fact, you don't want to turn it off because then you'll get people doing really crazy things. So you need a balancer. You want to suppress it to a point where there's more dopamine and serotonin than there is cortisol. And yes, there are things that individuals can do. There are exercises, there are mindsets, there's a lot of stuff that individuals can do. To work with organizations to say, well, what can you do as leaders? And I start with the premise that there are 5 things that will trigger off your limbic system. You may have heard something similar. David Rock talks about the scarf model. I've taken it a little bit further and I talk about at any point when these C's of comfort are compromised, the limbic system wakes up, and the more these are compromised, the more limbic system will happen. If you think about it in the context of organizations, think about what we do that we inadvertently trigger these C's. So here's one of them, competence. Now we know that when our competence is questioned, we get a bit prickly. Let's just say one word, feedback. I'd like to give you some feedback. Limbic system is wide awake going, I'm definitely going to fight here, okay, or burst into tears. So this is because our competence is being challenged. Whenever you bring in a new system, competence is being challenged, a new process. Even a new manager, a new leader can challenge people's sense of competence. Consistency. The brain is programmed to assume that anything that happens out of the ordinary, it's safer to assume it's a threat. Okay? It might be a big saber-toothed tiger, it might kill you. So you need to assume it's a threat. So imagine your boss phones you and says, it's Friday afternoon, you're just about going home for work, and your boss phones you and says, can I have a meeting with you 9 o'clock Monday morning? What is your limbic system doing? Now, unless that is a consistent 9 o'clock meeting on Monday morning, your limbic system will spend the entire weekend going, what did I do? What have I done? I'm about to lose my job. Then I'll probably lose my house and I'll probably end up living under a bridge, living off heroin. Okay? So it's inconsistent. And think about what we do with change and how often we change in organisations. We're constantly changing. Messages are not consistent. The way we communicate, the way culture in one team and another team, not consistent. Competency, consistency, control. From about the age of 2, we decide that we want to be in control. Cue terrible 2 tantrums. Cue lots of questions about why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do this? Well, unfortunately with employees, we've gone beyond the stage where we go, because I said so. People like to be in control. And at any time they feel they're not in control, the limbic system will assume that they're under threat. And we've got loads of research about why we should involve people in change and engage people and get them to buy in. This is why, because the brain needs it. Competence, consistency, control, connectedness. This one has been a big one with COVID. I've done a lot of work around how we're managing people with COVID. So we are pack animals. We're safer in groups. Our body rewards us for connecting with others. Oxytocin. If you've got a really good meeting with someone, it feels good. You get that cuddle hormone, and you feel good and you feel nice, and body goes tick, connected. When we're not connected or we're in part of the out group, it's a threat. Limbic system wakes up. We're just busy trying to deal with the pressure, the stress. And the last one is cause. If we have finite resources, I need to know why I'm expending my very precious physical, emotional, cognitive resources, investing in something you want me to do. Because unless I know why that is, I might be wasting cognitive, physical, or emotional resources. So we need to have an understanding of the cause and the why. So these are all elements that are going on. You can think of things within even the way organisations communicate. So we're going to do some changes because we're going to right size. Right size equals, oh my Lord, I may be losing my job, or we're going to seek out efficiencies. Does that mean they're going to automate my job? So the language we use can inadvertently trigger our limbic systems. Not everybody's, but some. And to add to that, if we want leaders who create a psychologically safe environment, you need to start at the leadership level. And this is the reason. Even leaders are people. I know. I could write an entire book. Leaders are human too. And they were human before they were leaders. Okay? So they also have these fears. They won't tell you, but they do. In fact, we all have those fears, and we have become very adept at hiding them. You don't kind of go around and go, hi, my name's Sam Mather. I have a very high control fear. People don't tell you that. So what we do is we hide our fears with something called ego. And as well as these ingrained fears, we've got some learned fears in here as well, like spiders and dentists and whatever. As you grow up, you develop your learned fears. But we're quite big with bravado to cover it up. And what we do is whenever we feel that these are being compromised, we shored up this ego with what I call the ego army. So around this ego is lots of little army people, okay? And I'm not going to draw it all the way around, don't worry. So we have an army here. And this army is highly trained, and you've trained it over your years of experience. You've trained it by looking at how your parents deal with things, by looking at how your peers deal with it, by looking at how your organization deals with things. And you train that army so it responds like this. So when the army perceives an incoming arrow called feedback, the army has been trained to do something with that. The army may, if it's feeling benevolent, may even let that in. I'm going to let that feedback in. The army may choose to deflect that arrow and say things like, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh, I don't agree with that. Or they're not in a position to give me that feedback. What do they know? Well, he's an idiot. I'm going to listen to that feedback. Excellent deflection. The army may also, and it works the other way as well, it can disarm the arrow. So the arrow could come in and the army take it and they disarm it. And we do that with positive feedback as well. If you're the sort of person who say, hey, that was really good. Oh, no, it's not, honestly. No, honestly. So it works both ways. But the army may also be taught to attack. When you see incoming, you attack. And obviously that's not attacking physical stabbing, but people will attack with shouting, anger, because one of these is being compromised and the limbic system takes over where the army lives and responds. And as soon as that army responds in that way, the other person, their army locks and loads. And they go, hang on, if they're going to attack me, this is not a safe environment, I'm going to attack back. Or I'm going to retreat and hide, fight or flight. So our organisation is a series of armies that are interacting, and it just takes one battalion to attack. It can trigger a lack of psychological safety. So what does that mean? Well, it means, first of all, we need to start with the leaders understanding. I was just talking to Richard. Why do the leaders want people back in 5 days a week? Why do they want them under their nose? Which fear are they concerned about? I'm just suggesting, I'm just saying. Or it might be a status thing. I need to be in control. I need to be seen to be doing things. Why? What's going on? What is the need? What is the driver for that? So it starts with leaders' self-awareness and being able to understand what is driving their leadership style and the impact it has on other people's armies. And where you want to get to is less of an army and more of just having a series of sentry posts dotted around, okay? And the sentry will go, Sam, incoming, what would you like us to do about it? Rather than just automatically respond. And that's where you need to get to. Now, of course, all these are not equal. Some people will have a whole load of army around control and nothing around competence, or vice versa, but that comes with self-awareness. Because it's this having this ego-light environment, along with a few other elements. I use the safe analogy. Leaders need to create a safe environment, and of that, having an ego-light environment is one of them. The other three are flourish. You need to allow people to flourish by development, growth mindset, learning organisation. You need to create an arena in which they operate, because ironically, if you want people to think out of the box and be creative, you almost need to give them some boundaries to work within. So if I said to you, if I put a plank on the floor, like I don't know, 2 metre by that much wide, and I said, I'll bet you gin and tonic that you can't walk over that. I'll take you, I am going to take you on. Then you'll walk over that plank, no bother. If I then put that plank between 2 10-storey buildings, going, okay, you think you can walk the plank, now you do it, now it's different. Now you're going to need more of a gin and tonic in order to get you over that. And that's what people feel like they're doing. They've got no support, there's nothing there, and it's a really windy, ever-changing environment. So, and all that does is stimulate the limbic system. But you put like a railing there and a net and maybe a little signpost going, if you look this way, you're pointing towards Sydney, something like that. The limbic system is quiet and they're able to enjoy the view. So we need to create an arena in which people operate. And finally, the other piece, which I've alluded to, very much around communication and the power of story. Lots of research at the moment about the correlation between excellent leaders and their ability to tell story. And all this has come from the research that I did around psychological safety, because all of these enable employees to maximize the amount of cognitive and emotional resources that they have available to invest in work, rather than thinking about what's my boss going to say now, my team hate me, what's going to happen next, where does my job go, how do I do this? So although there is a role for the individual to play, and they need to meet you not halfway, but 40% of the way, the majority of psychological safety is still a product of our environment. But in working with organisations, we need to work with the leaders and the employees so that they play their part. Half an hour. That's 3 years' work summarised in like half an hour, and in a very scribbly way. So I will send out a PDF of this, which is much prettier, and you'll be able to read it. But yeah, over to you. Any questions?
Thanks ever so much, Sam. Please do raise a hand, and we'd love to hear from you, and aspects of what Sam was saying that you'd like to pick up on. Rupert, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Sam. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
I
good.
can. Thank you.
Good. So listen, I really enjoyed the discussion around what leaders can do, and picked out optimism and hope as two things. I'd like to understand a little bit more if that's the literal sense of what optimism and hope really means. But I guess the question that I also wrote down, so it's a two-parter, I'm afraid, is on resilience. You said self-efficacy and attention control. Mm-hmm. And I nodded and then wrote them down, and then realised after reading them that I had no idea what they really meant. So I was wondering if you could just give me a bit of a sense about that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So self-efficacy is a belief in your own capabilities. This does not mean this is correct. This is your perception. All right. And we all know people who have much higher self-efficacy than they really can do. But you also have people who have very low self-efficacy, belief in their abilities, but we know that they can do it. So self-efficacy, and I also discovered self-efficacy is mistaken for confidence. Self-efficacy does not mean confidence. I have a high level of confidence that I'm not very self-efficacious when it comes to flying a plane. So my confidence is high about my ability not to do it. So self-efficacy is the ability to believe in yourself that you can deal with whatever life throws at you. And it often comes from past experience, which is why you build resilience. That's why we need to let kids fail. We need to let them fall, because it's the getting back up and realizing that I can do it. So building individuals' self-efficacy. The second one, attentional control, very interesting. So that started with some research that I looked into around actually depression and anxiety. And what was found that the ability to almost manage where you focus your attention has a great impact on your ability to manage your state. So, and this amazes me because I teach leaders and they're kind of like blown away by the fact that you can manage your emotional state. Oh, I can't help it if I'm angry. Well, you can actually. You can manage your, and it's about where you focus your attention. So if you focus, so there's a change at work. People can choose to focus their attention on, oh, they're changing again, the leaders don't know what they're doing. I mean, I'm going to have to do this and now I'm going to have to do that. And they choose, and it is a choice, they choose to focus their attention on the negative, thereby stimulating the cortisol and the adrenaline, and creating and reducing the ability to think smart and think big, think beyond themselves. Or they could choose to focus the other way and go, I can see that this is still a work in progress, but I can contribute and I can help here. Keeps the limbic system quiet and allows them to think smart and think bigger beyond themselves to the whole organization. Now, some people never learn to do that. It's their parents are negative, they've always been negative, but the concept that this is a choice on how you choose, where you choose to put your attention, changes your physical state, your mental well-being and your wellness, and learning how to do that is so powerful. I mean, my passion is to teach kids to do this. 16 to 24-year-olds, I want to, while the brain is still developing, is to teach people to manage their attentional control. So that's what I meant by attentional control. Does that answer your question, Rupert?
That's helpful, thank you.
Was there a second part, did you say, Rupert?
That was the second part. I guess the first part is optimism and hope, as I would expect it to be defined in terms of what leaders can do to create a safe environment.
So yeah, I know they get mixed up as well. So optimism is a belief in a positive outcome. Hope is so optimism is the outcome, hope is the will and the way. So I can see what I need to do and how I need to do it. Optimism is believing it will come out good in the end. So there's subtle differences, but academically they are defined differently. One's by Snyder and the other's by Carver and Schreier. They are different constructs and measured in different ways.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Rupert. Didn't appreciate the difference myself, I have to say. So I'm glad you asked, Rupert. Other questions? Other points? Is this ringing true to people?
One of the things I did find interesting as well is that psychological safety is vicarious. People see it vicariously. So what I noticed was because we all know that different teams have different cultures. If you're in this team here, okay, and you have a boss here, and this boss is great. I mean, you love working for this boss, psychologically safe and really happy. But over here is a team with a very grumpy boss, okay, who does not create a psychologically safe team. It reduces this person's psychological safety because they see what's going on here. And it's vicariously, they go, well, I know I'm happy because I'm working for this happy, psychologically safe boss. But the organization is allowing this. And if the organization allows this, then there's a little bit of my faith and my safety. You know, if this is allowable here, well, it could always be allowable here. So psychological safety is also assessed vicariously. So it is systemic. To create it is systemic.
Makes perfect sense. Gareth, hello.
Hi there, thanks for that, Sam. It's really interesting stuff. And I certainly recognise that vicarious bit. I have to say, when I speak to employees, this is probably a question that you could answer for the next couple of months. But your 5 C's, I presume there's a next stage that you work with leaders on about identifying what their 5 C's are and also what their teams are as well. Yes.
So often, I mean, there is work that I do with teams around recognizing this, but the irony is you need to have quite a safe team in the first place to address these issues, because you're now saying, well, you know, because I do a reflection model that allows people to really dig down and understand, why do I have this need for control? Right, so where is this control coming from? And understanding that. So with leaders, the way I've approached it in the past is we talk about this, we do a whole exercise on this, we talk about the ego army, we do examples at work, and then it's small groups or coaching. And a lot of reflection. So where does that come from? Where does that need to control come from? Why? Imposter syndrome, massive around competence, huge. The most successful people have imposter syndrome. It's just prevalent everywhere. And it's about understanding that and reframing your minds and that little worm of doubt that gnaws away at your brain, goes, you're useless. that, you need to chop that worm up. Okay, you need to replace that, and there are techniques and mechanisms to do that. There are lots of toolkits in the books, both for individual and leaders, that address each of these. And for the employees, the employees, we have sound. So the leaders create safe, the employees need to be sound. We start by teaching them how to sustain their brain. Yes, your brain needs carbohydrates, so please don't give them up. That doesn't mean say eat chips, just eat your veg. So, then you have to have, we talk about creating meaning in life, the ikigai and those sorts of things. Useful narrative. So stamp on that worm of doubt. And then this is the attentional control piece. Learning to be discerning about what and who are the resources that go in to help you float and rise. Okay. So it's safe for the leaders, sound for the employees, creating a safe and sound environment. Lots of techniques. Some of them are not mine. I mean, Ikigai is not mine, but it's a really good one. So I focused on that.
That'll help, Gary.
It's nice to see sort of a model. Yeah, it's nice to see a model that brings so many different elements that we work with, and we look at into one sort of overarching thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, my vocabulary left me there, but never mind.
Fine. I'm happy to call my model a thing. It's okay. So the thing that we've got here, and that's really it. But it is holistic and it's two-way. And there are some great models out there. And well, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. But just, I mean, the sustain one. People, it's really, really obvious. You need to eat well and you need to hydrate. You need to exercise and you need to sleep well. Duh, your parents were right. But what I've done is talk about why that is important from a neuroscience perspective. What's going on in the brain when you sleep? Why you need to sleep? Why you need to drink just normal water, not power, specialized, rainbow, unicorn breath. Just water out the tap. Just drink it. But also the stages, the brain waves that we go through. We go through 5 different brain frequencies. You need to hit all of them in a day. Otherwise, it's like going to the gym and just working one arm. You're going to get a great arm, but nothing else is going to be very fit. So if you want your brain fit, are you doing all of the 5, hitting all of the 5 frequencies? And one of which is sloth, being like a sloth, just going, I'm going to veg and watch Coronation Street, not have to think very much. That's really important for your brain. You need to step away. So all of
very good at that.
Oh yeah. I prescribe Coronation Street 3 times a week. Yes. So it gives you a rationale from the science about why we need to do what we need to do to keep our brain fit and keep safe and sound.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Sam. Time for another question. Before someone comes in, please do raise your hand. I was just thinking, Sam, when you work with leaders, is there one thing that you really wish they would do? If you could narrow it down to just one thing, just for the purposes of this webinar, to create psychological safety, or not do?
Let go of the fact that they think the leader needs to know all the answers. I think traditionally leaders were in the position they were in because they were there the longest, they knew the most. It doesn't work now. It's not about that, because you're dealing with people who know a lot more than you, specialists, really smart people, because you've employed them to be smart. But to use the old command and control style, you're just de-smarting them. You're just taking away any initiative they got. And I would just wish that people would understand a little bit more about what a good leader is. It's not a manager, and it's not, just learn to let go and be comfortable to do that. Not let go and like, bye, good luck, you're on your own, but let go in terms of the need to control and manage.
Great. Nice answer. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thank you. Oh, and one last question. Karina, thank you. Hello, Karina. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Richard. How are you?
All right, thanks.
Good. And you stole my question. One of my questions I was going to ask, was there a silver bullet in terms of, in your experience, is there one things? Sam, this has been fascinating, and I think we could all probably listen to you and listen to this topic for a long while. It's great. I wonder, I was taking it to an organisational level, and whether you saw any themes in terms of its link to culture. So of those 5 C's, or the safe and sound, is it useful to draw a link to what are we seeing culturally, so we know where to put our effort? Because I guess we could all work with individual teams, and we probably, do that. But if we were to take it, to our senior leaders and say, right, this is the organisational picture and its impact on culture, is that a helpful thing to do or not?
Definitely. So if you take a model like, I don't know, the Burt-Litwin model or Galbraith, or whichever your chosen model is, and you look at each of the element of an organisation, this is why I say psychological safety is holistic. How are we measuring competence and rewarding it? What about learning? So maybe somebody's learned a lot more rather than so I find people are getting rewarded. I've been in a job 20 years. Well, actually, no, you haven't. You've done 1 year 20 times over.
Okay.
What is the learning? What is the development? Are you rewarding people for learning? So your reward and recognition policies help play to this or not. Okay. I think there's a piece around spans of control and how you structure your organization, how you measure the KPIs, how people work together or not in terms of the structure. Obviously, the vision and the purpose, leaders being able to articulate the vision right the way down in a way that's meaningful for that individual. The consistency piece is difficult. I get that, because we are all in ever-changing environments. But things like, if you have to change a structure, make sure you have to do, you do it once. You're not changing regularly. Make it so that there's an element of fluidity about that. So if you took every element on the Burt-Litwin model, you could think about, what are we doing? What's our language using describing this? How are we rewarding it? What do the processes look like? How much do the processes enforce control? So I'm working with a bank that shall remain nameless at the moment, and I get that they are risk adverse. Who wouldn't be? They've got people's money. They need to be risk adverse, but that culture is absolutely killing any innovation, killing it, and they're struggling with this. But when I'm saying, well, you can still meet the risk requirements, make sure that risk is managed. But what you could do, for example, is look at what good looks like, what competency is. You could look at how people work together. You could look at how people are managed around that risk. Who's responsible for managing the risk? Is this like top down? How do you do that? So I think there is an element of OD on this, very systemic and high level, especially if an organization's just kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and not made a conscious decision about what do we want our culture to be, which happens.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone, for coming along. That was an excellent session, Sam. I really appreciate you doing it. Do stay on the line, Sam. I want to show you some of the feedback you've got. We'll see you all again shortly. But for now, very good to see you. Thanks a lot for your time. All the best.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.